Welcome back to Upside Down Data. We need to talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been showing some signs of life recently, and so I think the question on everyone's mind is this just a fake out, or are we actually maybe seeing a return of strength to Bitcoin that could take us to a new leg up? So what I want to do in this video is look at our models and see what they say about Bitcoin's likely path moving forward, both in the short and longer terms. So to start off with the shorter term outlook, I want to talk about our short-term UDPI risk model. So this is a risk model that cares about moves that play out over days to weeks, so shorter in its time horizon. And so higher values mean higher risk, lower values mean lower risk. So you can see that in this push that Bitcoin did to its all-time high up at about 74K, we got pretty high on the short-term UDPI, all the way up to about 2.25. And historically speaking, that's a pretty elevated level. You really only get above that at cycle tops on the short-term UDPI, or around cycle tops. So when we got there, I was saying at the time that I thought it was very likely that Bitcoin was going to need some time to cool off, that unless we just wanted to see Bitcoin go and blow itself out and go to some big cycle top like that, we'd like to see this cool off and let risk reset to then refuel for that next leg up. And so we got that correction. We got down below 60K in this drawdown, but now there's a possibility of us turning the corner. And we have a lot of realistic upside potential that exists in the short term. Basically, the upside potential right now outweighs the downside potential. That's what this negative value means. It means there's greater short-term upside potential that the model thinks exists for Bitcoin than plausible downside potential. So seeing Bitcoin go ahead and realize some of that in the short term would not be surprising at all. And in fact, it's already started to do that so far. So another model that we can look at that also tells a pretty nice story for the short term is our trend confidence indicator, or TCI. So I've talked about this model a lot, but it cares about trend, as the name suggests. And really the way that I like to look at this model is how is it moving relative to price? So if you see the TCI start to move up aggressively, that's often a bullish sign, and price can often follow up along with it, especially when you're in a bull market. But then when you see the TCI start to move down aggressively, that suggests a weakening in the market, and then Bitcoin will either go sideways or often correct coming off of that oftentimes. And that kind of pattern has repeated, generally speaking, this entire move up for Bitcoin this cycle. You know, we had the TCI moving up aggressively here in January 2024, went up to all-time highs, then the TCI started moving down aggressively, leading into this big correction. But you'll notice now, it seems like the tide might be turning. It seems like the TCI is moving up in a notable way. And that's where when you see this in conjunction with such a low UDPI level, short-term UDPI level, it's a good story for the short term. It means that Bitcoin could have strength coming back into it while it has plenty of short-term upside potential to work with. That's a reasonable setup to think that it can have some moves up from here. Now, it's an open question whether or not it's going to be able to go and just only go back and retest the highs, if it can actually go back and actually set a new all-time high from here. But certainly conditions are looking better now than they have really ever since the all-time high back here in March of 2024. This is the best setup that we've seen really since this move up to the all-time highs. So time will tell if that plays out, but something I'm going to be watching closely. And I do think that the conditions are favorable now from a data-driven perspective based on what these models are saying, and a lot better than they were just a month or two ago. So not financial advice, you should make of these data as you will, but this is a very good sign in my opinion, a very nice condition to be in to see some upside, at least in the shorter term. Now, if we flip over to the longer term perspective, things are also looking interesting here. So this is our long-term UDPI risk model. So similar idea to the short term, that this cares about moves that play out over months to multiple months, so longer in its time horizon. And what you'll notice is that the longer term UDPI gotten pretty extended back through here, right up to 2.5. And again, I was vocal about this, saying that you just don't see these levels very often. And it either means we're going to some cycle top, which I don't think anyone wanted that quickly, or some kind of notable local top like we've seen at some of these other points. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have this super protracted downtrend coming off of it like in 2019 or in early 2013, but even something like here back in June of 2017, some notable drawdown before being able to move back up. So we've gotten a reasonably notable drawdown from here, so the possibility emerges for a continuation. But I do think it bears mentioning that we might not necessarily be out of the woods yet for the possibility of a bit of a longer cooling off or drawdown for Bitcoin from current levels. But what I will maintain, what I've maintained this entire correction so far, is that that would actually only be a good thing in my mind. You'll see already what this has done for the long-term risk of Bitcoin already, this correction that we've had. Look at how much Bitcoin's long-term risk has cooled off, gone all the way back down to negative 1.68. And what you'll see is that in the past, in these prior cycles, it's often been a very good thing to let risk cool back off to those levels, because that can really catalyze that next leg up further on. I mean, look what happened in 2019. You got this fantastic value zone to reacquire Bitcoin down through here before the next explosion up. And so really, if we just have more consolidation here, even more correction, I would only see that as a continued opportunity for Bitcoin's risk to cool off, maybe set up another deep value acquisition zone like we've seen in prior cycles, even in the middle of prior cycles before that ultimate explosion. And that's really one of the things that I think is important to keep in mind, is that everyone wants up only, but the problem with that is that if Bitcoin goes too far up too quickly, it could risk really overextending itself to such a point that really the only possible path forward is a nasty bear market like we've seen at prior cycle tops. So I personally am not very concerned with this, and if we see this continue, I would not necessarily see that as a bad thing. And I'm going to talk in a minute about some invalidations that would make me concerned if that were to continue happening. But as long as the other long-term data look bullish, this in my view would only be a good thing. Again, just my view, not financial advice. You should make your own opinions. Now, what is some of that data I'm also going to be looking at for what the longer term outlook is if that remains bullish? So one of the models that I like to keep an eye on is the momentum bias indicator, or MBI. So this model cares all about momentum, as the name suggests. And really the way that you can look at this is, where is it spending most of its time? So if you see the MBI spending most of its time up here in the green, that's a bullish sign. That means you're probably in the stronger part of the bull market, maybe leading to a cycle top. If you're then spending a lot of your time down here in the red, that means you're probably in the middle of the nasty part of the bear market, not a whole lot of hope. But then when you have this kind of behavior, like through here, for example, of kind of oscillating around zero, going up, then coming back down, up, back down, that is a telltale sign that you're in a transition period out of a bear market going into a bull market. That's played out over and over and over again. Even in this cycle, we saw that happen. Coming out of the bear, oscillating around zero, and that's more or less what we've continued to do. We've kind of gotten more bias to the upside, suggesting that maybe we're entering potentially into a stronger part of a bull market, possibly, but we are still kind of in that oscillation period. And so when you're in that transition period, you could either just go off into this kind of full-blown bull market up to the cycle top, or something like we've seen, for example, here in 2019, or back here in 2013, is you could have a really strong move, like maybe what we saw here, or we saw here, but then have a longer period of drawdown or consolidation before you go back into the bull market. But either of those are a good thing. And really the thing that you can look at in both those scenarios is that you don't go down deep into the negatives and stay there for too long. So even in 2019, we did have a more of a mini bear market through here, but then we popped up back above zero, had the flash crash in 2020, but then very quickly reversed course. And so this was really just going back into that transitionary behavior, this oscillation period, kind of out of a mini bear market and then back into the bull market. Similar thing here. Even if we do have a longer period of consolidation or correction, as long as we don't start acting like this on the MBI, I'm not going to be ready personally necessarily to just conclude we must be in a new bear market. And it could be we have this longer period of correction to play out. But also, we could just continue off to the upside. We could just bounce back up here into the green, go way up in here, have the next leg up, and just go about our merry way. Maybe something more like in 2017, where we really kind of kept things under control to some degree until finally going off and blowing off to the upside. Maybe something like that could continue playing out for Bitcoin, this kind of slow roll into a big parabolic move like we saw there. Something to watch, but certainly I'm not seeing signs for concern yet. I do expect this to reverse back up above zero, most likely, if we see continued upside. If we do realize some of the short-term upside potential, I think that's probably what's going to happen. And that would just be very much in line with what we've seen in prior transitions, and then into the kind of mid stages of a bull market. So nothing concerning from what I'm seeing on the MBI right now. Now, the other model we can look at is the forecast model. And this is one I think is very useful to keep an eye on personally. So this gives you the probability that Bitcoin's price will be above where it is right now 6 months in the future. And so it's a probability. So 0.97 here, for example, is a 97% chance that Bitcoin's price will be above where it is then 6 months in the future. And of course, it absolutely nailed that through this bull market. And see, it does a very good job of identifying when is the bear market coming and when are you transitioning into bullish periods. You see, it absolutely nailed this cycle. It got bullish right at the right time. We then went up only, basically, with volatility, but basically just rallying this whole way. Now, what's notable is that we did have a bit of a drop off of this very bullish footing. We dropped all the way down to just under 0.5 over here. Now, there are different ways that you can interpret that. This could you could have just interpreted it as up, it's over, we're now going into a bear market. But you'll notice that in prior cycles, you will see this happen, that as you go into kind of the fuller parts of a bull market, you'll get these drawdowns down here, and then the model reverses itself, drawdown, so on and so forth. And so what this might be a suggestion of is that we're moving out of the early stages of the bull market, maybe more towards the mid phases of the bull market. So it doesn't mean that significant upside can't remain, but it might just be a sign that we're not at the point where the model feels quite as confident at just hanging out at the super high levels only. That it's seeing things that are saying, okay, I'm going to take a step back and not be quite as confident here, but then it will reassess and then potentially, move back up later on. But I think it might just be a sign that we're not in that early phase anymore. And frankly, that is the way it probably should be. We're already have put in a new all-time high. In the past, when Bitcoin has done that, it's already been in a pretty full-throated part of its bull market. We're seeing that kind of thing play out here once again. I mean, even look here in this run up into clear new all-time highs, that was when we had that first move down. It's not surprising to see that. What I would be concerned by is if we see this really fall off a cliff down into the deep reds and stay there, be unable to move back up into these higher levels. That would suggest, like in the past, that you're likely moving out of that bull phase and then into that bearish phase. But we're not there yet. So far, so good. The bull market still remains intact. So when I look across these data, then what I'm seeing is I'm seeing hopeful signs for Bitcoin. I'm seeing it having a lot of upside potential in the short term. It could go ahead and try to realize. The trend is looking good. Some strength is re-entering the market from the TCI's perspective. So short term seems like things could move. And we're also seeing things cool off on the longer term. Risk cool off, more upside potential in that longer term manifest. Momentum bias is still looking very much or behaving much like it does in bull markets. Nothing to worry about there yet, in my opinion. And the forecast model, I'm still not concerned yet, although again, it still seems like we are exiting that early phase and then maybe going into that mid phase. But frankly, that shouldn't be a surprise. Again, the best time to buy Bitcoin was back through here when we were talking about it and no one else was. Now, it may or may not be a bad time, but certainly the best times are behind us. And I think that's what this model is really kind of telling us here. Still plenty of upside that could come, but the best times are behind us. All right, so if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us over on X. A lot of updates about our models and more over there. And you go to our website, polaritydigital.io, to see live data from our models and more.